Bob Chesney reportedly has a top target for UCLA's next general manager.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen every day. It's free wherever your podcast is available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Welcome back, everydayers. What we're talking about today, UCLA's potential options in the portal at the quarterback position. One key guy stands out to me. And who are the rest of the guys heading to the portal as of this moment? Next, we'll talk about UCLA's two missing bigs on the basketball front. But we have to start with this. The report from Matt Zenitz that UCLA has a target from Florida State that they're going after Darrick Yray as their next GM. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So the report this morning coming out of 24/7 Sports, Matt Zenitz coming through and saying, hey, UCLA is looking to go after Darrick Yray of Florida State, all right? And Ray, not spelled how it sounds, Y-R-A-Y, Darrick Yray. If you're going to go look that up on social media, look that up in any sort of search. For Darrick, he's a guy that was kind of a key architect for Florida State's recruiting in their undefeated regular season when they had everything going right, the last year of the 14 playoff, and then their quarterback gets hurt. And then everything goes to chaos. And the Florida State program under Mike Norvell has not been the same since. And I've kind of done a little research, trying to see what the fan base has and why they have so much animosity towards Darrick Yray, but they do. But Darrick Yray is a recruiting savant who came over from Oregon State. So the key thing here for UCLA looking for their next potential general manager is Chesney has stated he wants guys that have West Coast ties. He wants guys specific potentially to UCLA. While Yray is a Fresno State grad, he's a West Coast guy. So while Chesney has some East Coast ties with his coaching tenure throughout his 16 years as a head coach, he wants to get guys that have connections to the West Coast. And Yray was a recruiter for Oregon State for a few years to early 2022. Well, the 2022 season, Oregon State was 10-3 under Jonathan Smith, and a top 15 team that beat Oregon that year. At their red hot, they almost could have made a Pac-12 championship game. So what UCLA is trying to do is tap into Ray's West Coast connections. And for Yray, it's an opportunity for him to kind of dust off some of this Florida State nonsense, right? There are a lot of Seminole fans out there that are happy that Yray might be leaving to UCLA. They say good riddance. But the stink from the Seminoles is this a Mike Norvell thing, or they've been falling short in the portal? Has there really been a stench since Florida State didn't make the playoff, a 14 playoff, and got left out in favor of Alabama? Something that might have been even more controversial at the time than the current state of college football, Miami and Notre Dame and BYU, all right? So Florida State's been hurting ever since. And a couple of mediocre, somewhat downright terrible years for Florida State, and you're like, okay, is Darrick Yray the guy? But it's a hit or miss, right? UCLA has had some good recruiting success, but have they been overpaying some mediocre talent? Have they been under-evaluating some other guys? Curt Cignetti has found the diamonds in the rough, bringing the James Madison's players, bringing the Sun Belt guys, finding the three-star players in the portal from the other universities that are maybe underwhelming with their overall record, but finding potential stars. And Indiana in 2 years have been to the CFP and the number one overall seed in the 2025 season. What Chesney is trying to do is balance, how do I tap into recruiting? UCLA already had a good little feel for a national recruiting base under Deshaun Foster. Foster had saw what UCLA had done poorly under Chip Kelly. Well, namely, any other sort of effort recruiting-wise would have been better than Chip Kelly. So Deshaun Foster went out there. So for Yray to come to UCLA, who was part of a good recruiting cycle for Florida State, was part of a program in Oregon State that built up and right after he left was super successful, all right? He was hired in February of 2022. And unlike this year's UCLA team that had a lot of pieces constructed, a lot of this roster constructed after April, That's not the same thing that probably was happening in 2022. So that Oregon State team that was really good, Ray had a hand in it. You think about Florida State's team that was really good, had a hand in it. So how much did Mike Norvell lead to his own downfall, which isn't over yet at Florida State, versus Ray needing those West Coast connections and maybe having a Florida pipeline or two if there are any bridges burnt over there. But the Bruins are looking to swing big. And for Florida State to be saying, all right, yeah, we'll give up our GM, the Bruins are either going to find a diamond in the rough looking to get back home for a California dude, or Florida State knows something we don't. And considering the Seminoles have just swung and missed, and with the way Mike Norvell's kind of been whatever, I tapped into our Florida State source here with Locked On, and he's like, yeah, little hit or miss potentially with Darrick Yray, but Mike Norvell is the one that's taken a lot of criticism, and he is changing his staff again and again and again. So for UCLA, they just need to get out there and showcase there's something new. There's a lot of new energy with Bob Chesney. He's going to have quite a bit of say in terms of, hey, this is who I want. This is who I want to target from the portal, from next year's recruiting class in 27, and then who you can still get in 26. Yet for Chesney, he needs somebody with West Coast connection. So bringing Ray potentially back home could be that for him and get him closer to be like, all right, this is a program that's on the rise. They're not looking for what Florida State is, which is superior 5 stars to energize a fan base, where Chesney is trying to find the diamonds in the rough and showcase, hey, we're building with new resources. A new energy is here, so it might be even easier to recruit UCLA versus what's a crumbling brand in Florida State. I might personally want to bank this case on, give Ray that chance. This is a good recruiter, and there are a couple of guys who cover Florida State that I've seen, whether it's 24/7 Sports, maybe even CBS Sports, if I got that right there, that are like, it's Norvell who's the problem, and it's not been Ray's ability to identify or recruit. It's been Norvell getting his hand into things that has led to Florida State's own downfall, all right? Whereas you bring Ray here, I'm assuming Bob Chesney's got a lot better handle on recruiting. You already see the James Madison commits moving over to UCLA. Now you just got to have a mass entry of players from the portal committing to UCLA in the early winter months of January through February after the portal opens. So the Bruins have their work cut out for them. They're looking for somebody new. Curry Darlington is the current GM. He was the one taking questions for UCLA on early signing day when they had the press conference, but it looks like they're looking to head in a new direction and tap into something else. And I think it actually will work if Darrick Yray is the guy who, according to Matt Zenitz, UCLA is targeting to be their next GM. Get that Florida State stink off. I think that's more of a Mike Norvell issue, and the Bruins could potentially have a recruiting savant that can tap into West Coast ties. Next, let's talk about what UCLA lost on the basketball side of things from their recent transfer portal exodus. 2 bigs. I've already talked about Aday Mara, but UCLA actually misses William Kyle III more than we realize. Why? I'll tell you next on Locked On UCLA. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is the best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, defense tightens up, momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. The player props updates, the guys heat up. You can bet on the next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. Keeps you locked in to every snap, every drive, and every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Now we're talking next about UCLA's missed players from last year's team. Guys that would have made a significant impact for Mick Cronin on this year's team, and maybe even next. Well, obviously, we'll start with Aday Mara as a big post player the Bruins are missing. But what was the thing that kind of was the decisive part? UCLA between Mick Cronin and Aday Mara, whereas he wasn't always in the game. Cronin talking about his energy level, his ability to play more than 20 minutes consistently was a problem. He was a little bit sick. There was the the rumors about him not wanting to practice as much, and the battle between those two guys as to what it took for UCLA to utilize a 7-footer they desperately need this year led to a breaking point that might gift Michigan a national championship. Arizona is the number one team overall right now, but Michigan is dominating teams so well that Arizona might lose the number one overall ranking for the AP poll soon, not from their own problems, not for anything they've done, just because Michigan is beating good Power 5 teams by 30 on the regular. And they just did that to Villanova. And with the help, a little bit of Aday Mara. So this is what Michigan is bringing to the table. At the moment, they're the class of the Big Ten after Purdue lost by like 30 at home. One of the worst losses I've ever seen Purdue for number one overall ranked team take. So Aday Mara, here's something that UCLA is missing. A big man that's averaging 9.5 points and almost 9 rebounds per game. All right. Now imagine if UCLA had that consistent force in the paint that didn't force Mick Cronin to take Booker out of the play, right? This is a guy who is a defensive force. And it's not that Mara was always the most athletic for UCLA. It's the fact that just him being on the court made teams have to think elsewhere about going into the paint. What would have been interesting is if UCLA could have gone back and forth between a Booker and a Mata. All right. In the latest game for Michigan, Mata put in 23 minutes, went 11 points, 8 boards, close to a double-double. All right. And for a team that's been dominating as much as Michigan has, Mara hasn't had to put in 30 minutes outside of one game. And that was Michigan's overtime win against Wake Forest, where Mara put on a clinic, 18 points, 13 rebounds. All right. So Mara shooting 61% from the floor, has 25 block shots, has been pretty solid helping out the team in assists while limiting his turnovers. The one thing, though, for Mara, as much as the 9-9 is good for Michigan, this is a guy who Cronin saw, okay, can he really push Mata on the floor? Can he really push him in terms of minutes on the court? After that overtime win for Mata and the Michigan Wolverines against Wake Forest, Mata's numbers dipped from 15 points per game and 12.5 rebounds per game, and he's dropped 6 points per game and dropped almost 4 rebounds per game. He's only averaging in these last couple of games since the big numbers he's had, a little more than 6 rebounds per game and a little more than 6 points per game. He had 40% of his blocks in the first 2 games, 5 against Oakland, 5 against Wake Forest. So maybe Cronin knew something in terms of if you push him just a lot more, then just a little bit less you're going to get from Mara over the long term. And since Mata's played 37 minutes, he hasn't played more than 22, 23 minutes. Now, some of that's because Michigan won every game in their Thanksgiving feast week by 30 or 40 points. They haven't had to push Mara. They have Yaxel Lendenberg. They have so many talented guys. Their coach May, can go put out anybody. And they can go put up big numbers from Elliot Cadeau to anybody. It's a crazy lineup. But imagine, okay, when he's gotten pushed a little bit, numbers-wise, minutes-wise, those minutes have reduced. That's something to take note of. But I'm not going to say UCLA would not be blessed to have him. They would. This is a guy who UCLA desperately needs in the middle of the lineup. But the guy the Bruins probably could have taken a better look at, somebody who was severely underused in last year's lineup, was William Kyle III. Huge block for the Bruins to win that Wisconsin game. Had a big game, I believe, last year against Iowa. He was the transfer from South Dakota State, and in his senior season, a 6'9 center. Remember what UCLA just recruited, a 6'9 center, Javonte Floyd from Georgia. All right, so they got a guy who kind of fits that same mold that William Kyle III is right now with Syracuse in the orange out in the ACC. So what the Bruins are looking to target for the future is another center who they just lost. William Kyle III's numbers have actually been pretty good so far. For Kyle III, he started every game. He's played more than 30 minutes, about half the time when he's needed to. And Kyle this year is averaging just shy of 10 points per game and just shy of 8 rebounds per game. William Kyle III is averaging more points than Aday Mara per game. Now, obviously, different team, different roster, different needs, but Kyle really put on a good show in various fashion, offensively, defensively, rebounding against Houston, right? Against the Houston Cougars during that feast week of Thanksgiving, he put up 12 points, had 3 steals on 4 of 6 shooting, playing 36 minutes, 10 rebounds, and was still pretty solid distributing the basketball in 36 minutes and an overtime loss for Syracuse against Houston, a national championship contender, a team that year in and year out is always tough to compete against. Against Kansas, some similar numbers, 9 points, 9 rebounds. Iowa State, not the best, but Iowa State might be one of the best teams in the country. Just the other week against Tennessee, when Syracuse hosted the Vols, this was another outstanding performance for William Kyle. 10 points, he had 7 rebounds, and 6 blocks. 6 blocks against Tennessee. That's how you know the athleticism was real. That's what the Bruins are missing this year, a rim protector and a lob threat for Donovan Dent. And while Jamerson could come off the bench and sometimes provide a little bit of that, I think Kyle is better in all of those things. Imagine if UCLA was able to have a Booker, Kyle, and Jamerson, right? UCLA has Peoples Jr. as just a backup big that doesn't see any time. If UCLA was able to keep Kyle III from transferring out, now I'm not sure what led to the deterioration, the deteriorating relationship with Mick Cronin and Kyle. It was obviously very different from Aday Mara, but I'm assuming Kyle was something along the lines of he didn't get enough playing time, not enough PT, despite him fitting the mold of what UCLA needed this year as well. Mara was one thing, a big-time force that could maybe work in the NBA in the future, while Kyle is that super athletic 6'9" big who could dunk, has a solid shooting percentage. Kyle this year is shooting just shy of 70% from the floor. Now, both Mara and Kyle struggle from the free throw line. Their numbers are almost similar. 41% from the line, 60+% from the floor, almost 10 and 10, 9 and 9. And when it comes to points per game, rebounds per game, guys who can block shots. For Mara, all he has to do is stick his hand up. You can't shoot over him. Kyle can get up that high and block shots. We've seen it with UCLA's game on the line against Wisconsin. The Bruins, if they had either one of those, would be a completely different team. So it's like, man, what could have been for the Bruins? Now, Booker has been a surprise, strong offensively. Jamerson is always the heart and hustle Cronin loves to get defensively, rebounding the basketball. He's talked about Jamerson's ability to get an NBA rebound. But Mara doesn't even have to leave the floor to get a rebound. Kyle could probably go get some of those if he was given more time this year. And instead, UCLA is trying to balance between Booker's ability to score, him learning the 5 under Mick Cronin's defensive intensity, what he needs and what this roster needs as a rim protector. And Booker has showcased some of that. While he had proven guys, whether it was Mara in the second half of the season in 24 to 25, or Kyle from his Summit League days to his brief tenure at UCLA, now to Syracuse, man, a little frustrating in that regard, but the Bruins need that type of shot blocker to develop in Jamerson. They need that, and they need Booker to stay on the floor and not have Cronin pull him after 18 to 20 minutes if teams are going on a run and his three-point shot's not falling. So that's what the Bruins are missing right now. They're missing Aday Mara, obviously, but Kyle is putting up similar production in the ACC and doing it against some of the nation's best. Something to take note of when Cronin is recruiting the portal next year, that maybe he didn't miss as much. It's can he retain the talent, develop them, and keep them all happy at once? And that's clearly not what happened for UCLA in the post last year. Next, we're talking UCLA's potential to go get a transfer QB. Is it JMU's? No, here's another guy UCLA could go after in that same conference, and let's update the list as to who is the latest for the Bruins expected to transfer when the window opens. Next on Locked On UCLA. Let's talk about something most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life. It just doesn't switch off at night, and when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rugiet Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rugiet Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rugiet Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in one mint that dissolves under your tongue so it absorbs fast. It's easy to understand why 150,000 men have already made the switch, because you connect with a board-certified doctor online and everything ships discreetly to your door. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. Now it's time to talk about a next target for UCLA at quarterback if Nico Iamaleava leaves. And I don't know just yet what Nico's plans are. I've heard rumblings of his team, and we know how infamous his team is, looking at other options. Now, does that mean he's going to stay? Bob Chesney loves a good dual threat QB. That's what Alonzo Barnett III has been for JMU. But here's another quarterback in the Sun Belt Conference that's already announced his intention to hit the transfer portal when it opens. UCLA should take a look if Nico is not coming back. Now, there's no word on yes or no, so don't take this as a definite, but this is a guy the Bruins should take a look at. Colton Joseph. This is a guy who was highlighted a lot by Locked On the Portal. Brian Smith, he's been a guest of this podcast, really good around that region at dissecting QBs. And this is somebody in Colton Joseph. What's his connection? What can make him a special guy for UCLA? Well, he's got a couple of years of eligibility, still needs some growing. Now, he could be an expensive option for UCLA in this upcoming transfer portal window to go for quarterback. I think Brian Smith was trying to calculate between upwards of maybe $3 million in NIL opportunities you might have to get for a guy who is the Sun Belt honorable mention QB a year ago. He was the offensive player of the year in the conference this year. And the difference between him and Barnett is this is a guy who is from Newport Beach, a SoCal born and bred kid. West Coast guy, more than 1 year of eligibility. Barnett is a redshirt junior. Colton Joseph is a redshirt sophomore, all right? This was Joseph's freshman year, all right? This was his freshman year. His numbers in 2024, in 9 games, had 1,600 yards passing, 11 touchdowns, okay? Completion percentage, just under 60% as a freshman. In his rushing statistics, had 647 yards rushing, and 11 touchdowns, about 5.5 yards per carry. All right, that was his freshman numbers. His sophomore numbers have been even better. All right, this year, 2,600 yards passing, 21 touchdowns to 10 INTs. One of his worst games was a 3-interception game against Indiana, but his dual threat ability is so solid. He's got 13 rushing touchdowns on 84 yards per game. 84 yards per game on the ground, including 3 100-yard rushing games. All right. So this is a guy that is a true dual threat QB. And I mentioned, okay, maybe that completion percentage, not the best, just under 60%. So needs some development in the passing game. But his legs make him a true weapon, just like what we saw with Nico this year. And if Nico doesn't return, here's the next thing for a redshirt sophomore quarterback from SoCal, 6'2", 200 pounds, against Indiana. While he wasn't throwing the ball particularly well, had less than 100 yards passing, ran for 179 yards against Indiana in 2 scores, including almost an 80-yard scamper. All right. So against an Indiana team that has beaten, battered, and bruised anybody in their path, and I mean anybody, including UCLA, to the tune of a 50-point beatdown, basically, when the Bruins were still red hot, end of October, heading in November. Nico was healthy, playing at quarterback. On opening night in Indiana, when we were still unsure if they're going to be able to repeat 2024, Old Dominion went into Bloomington and played them pretty close, 27-14. This kid ran for almost 180 yards alone. His inability to throw the ball down the field has proven to be, that's what most QBs struggle to do, including a Heisman finalist, Julian Sayin, wasn't able to do so consistently. Ohio State wasn't doing big things in the Big Ten championship game. Indiana's not exactly going down against teams and getting in shootouts this year. That's not what's happening in 2025. Nico's first pass against Indiana, pick 6. Okay? And now if Nico stays, obviously you don't need to go after Colton Joseph. All right? You got a dual threat QB if Nico doesn't test the portal, test the pros, or go look at his options elsewhere. But Colton Joseph ran for almost 180 yards against an Indiana team that is as physical and as dominant as one we've seen in the college football season this year. All right? And he did that just on pure athleticism and skill alone, it seemed like, on opening night. Against Virginia Tech a couple weeks later, 276 yards passing, 72% completion percentage, and 2 touchdowns, no picks, and a rushing score. So, in a game against the top-ranked team in the country, had a standout number and was pretty good. Then, against a game where it's another power conference foe, was the reason why that guy got fired. Was one of the reasons why Indiana had some groans early, and was one of the reasons why Virginia Tech is now hiring James Franklin. Nico's the reason that James Franklin got fired. This kid is the reason that James Franklin got hired at Virginia Tech. Isn't that a fun comparison there? Just because he can run the football from the quarterback position. Dual threat guy. Now Barnett, who was one of the best players for JMU, could also be an option. I'm not saying that's not something UCLA or even Bob Chesney could look at. Because still, James Madison, to tell you this dominance that is Bob Chesney's defense, for a guy like Colton Joseph, who could run the football as elite as he could, had at least 60 to 50 yards per game. The least amount of yards that Joseph had in a game rushing was 50. He played James Madison on the road. The Dukes put up 63 in Old Dominion. And in this game, Joseph only had 4 yards rushing. Had a long of 17, but that tells you how many negative plays, how dominant the Dukes were getting into the backfield. That's how elite the D-line was, the defensive adjustments to contain a dual threat QB. So it tells you a well-managed game plan can still get you to go and get stopped. So Chesney, against this guy who's one of the top-rated QBs in the portal, that defense had Joseph with one of his worst games running the football. And while he still threw for 3 scores, had 2 picks. So they turned him over, didn't let him get loose on the grounds, and showcases UCLA's defense should be much better and a lot more physical in 2026. I still believe Joseph is a guy from Newport Beach, California, that you should go after in the portal if Nico doesn't come back. To wrap things up, though, here is the latest list of UCLA's intentions to transfer, because it doesn't open until January 2nd. Croy Stewart, UCLA DB, been around for a couple years. Rico Flores Jr., one of the top-rated transfers in the portal for UCLA from the wide receiver position, coming from Notre Dame. Suffered injury in 2024 after a huge game in Deshaun Foster's first game at head coach. The Bruins gave him the ball against Hawaii, missed a large part of 2024, missed the beginning of 2025, and just really never got his footing in a UCLA uniform. So he's intending to transfer. And we've already talked about the DBs. You have Cole Martin, Andre Jordan Jr., Scooter Jackson. You have LaRue Zamorano III. A lot of players in the secondary. And the latest is Jack Peterson, I think, reporting to Matt Zenitz in 24/7 Sports, that he is intending to transfer. So UCLA now has at least 7 players intending to transfer as of this moment. Now notice, didn't say Nico. As much as I talked for this segment about Nico, the Bruins could have some fallback options, whether it's Barnett from JMU, Colton Joseph from Old Dominion, if you want to go in that same conference that Bob Chesney was just looking at. If they want to pay a hefty price to go get a transfer QB, or they can stick with Luke Duncan. But right now, the 7 transfers are Stewart, Rico Flores Jr., Zamorano, Scooter Jackson, Andre Jordan Jr., Cole Martin, and Jack Peterson, the tight ends. So the Bruins are going to have to get physical, get some big bodies up front, get a new tight end, and that's what Chesney has to do in the portal, just like he did to rebuild the talent and keep the program successful once Curt Cignetti left to Indiana and took some of the best and most talented players over to Bloomington. Now Chesney's trying to do the same while coaching JMU in a playoff game and bring the talent to UCLA. All right, so that's the update, and that's all we got now. The next episode, we're going to be talking more UCLA Gonzaga, more UCLA football, and Bob Chesney, and build you guys up to UCLA playing Gonzaga in this upcoming battle against Graham EK and the Zags. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked on UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.